How far can a woman push before the tables turn? When I posted a picture with my ex to prove I didn't care if my husband left, I thought I was in control, until I came home to find only his essentials gone and a cold, factual note taped to the fridge. Why did I still feel blindsided, even after I convinced myself I'd already won? My name is Amaris Veylin, and I'm 34 years old. I work as an insurance claims manager at Hartford Regional, processing accident reports and damage assessments all day. It's decent money, steady hours, and mind-numbingly predictable, just like everything else in my life had become. Scott Harker, my husband of 8 years, teaches high school mathematics. He's 36, methodical, and so routine-oriented that I could set my watch by his daily habits. Coffee at 6:15, shower at 6:30, out the door by 7:20, home by 4:15, dinner prep by 5, bedtime by 10:30. For years, I found his consistency comforting. Now it felt like a prison sentence. "Mum, can you help me with my science project?" Our 9-year-old daughter Nora appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching a poster board and looking anxious. She had Scott's thoughtful brown eyes and my stubborn chin. "What's it about, sweetheart?" I asked, barely glancing up from my phone, where I was scrolling through Instagram stories of friends living apparently exciting lives. "Solar systems. Dad said he'd help me tonight, but he's grading papers again." Of course he was. Scott lived in that home office, surrounded by stacks of algebra tests and geometry quizzes. When he wasn't grading, he was planning lessons or updating his gradebook. The man treated teaching like it was rocket science. "I'll help you in a minute," I said, still scrolling. A college friend had posted photos from her weekend in Miami. Cocktails, beach clubs, gorgeous men buying her drinks. Meanwhile, I was stuck in suburban Connecticut, watching my husband grade papers for the millionth time. My phone buzzed with a text message. The name that appeared made my pulse quicken. Julian Rowe. "Hey, beautiful. Heard you're still in town. Want to grab a drink sometime and catch up?" Julian, my ex-boyfriend from college. We'd dated for 2 years before I met Scott. He was everything Scott wasn't. Spontaneous, charming, exciting. He'd moved away after graduation, but apparently he was back, and apparently he still had my number. "Amaris." Nora's voice brought me back to reality. "Are you going to help me?" "Yes, honey. Just give me a second." I stared at Julian's message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. What harm could there be in just talking to an old friend? "Maybe," I typed back. "When did you have in mind?" His response came immediately. "Tomorrow night, that little bar on Elm Street, 7 o'clock. My heart raced. I shouldn't. I was married. I had a daughter. But God, when was the last time I felt excited about anything? "Amaris." Scott appeared in the kitchen looking tired. His brown hair was slightly messed up from running his hands through it while grading. "Nora needs help with her project." "I know, I was just finishing something." He glanced at my phone, then at me. "Work stuff?" "Yeah," I lied smoothly. "Complicated claim." Scott nodded and turned to Nora. "Come on, kiddo, let's get started on those planets." As they headed to the dining room table, I quickly typed back to Julian, "See you there." The next evening, I told Scott I was having drinks with my friend Tessa from work. He barely looked up from his lesson plans. "Have fun," he said absently. "Don't stay out too late." Don't stay out too late. Like I was his teenage daughter instead of his wife. The bar on Elm Street was dimly lit and intimate. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth. He looked good, really good. He'd always been handsome, but now he had that confident, mature appeal that came with being in your 30s. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he wore a fitted black shirt that showed off his gym-tone physique. "Amaris Veylin," he said, standing to hug me. "You look incredible." I'd spent an hour getting ready, choosing a form-fitting red dress that I hadn't worn in years. Scott probably wouldn't have noticed if I'd worn a potato sack. "Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." We slid into the booth, and Julian ordered us drinks. Whiskey for him, wine for me. The conversation flowed easily, just like it used to. He told me about his life. He'd been living in California, working in marketing, recently moved back to Connecticut to help his aging parents. He was bartending part-time while looking for something permanent. "So you're married," he said, nodding toward my wedding ring. "Happy?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course," I said automatically. Julian raised an eyebrow. That didn't sound very convincing. I took a large sip of wine. "It's complicated." "It always is. Tell me about him." So I did. I found myself complaining about Scott's predictability, his obsession with work, the way our marriage had settled into a boring routine. Julian listened intently, occasionally touching my hand or arm for emphasis. "You deserve better than that," he said when I finished. "You were always so full of life, so passionate." When was the last time anyone had called me passionate? I got home at 11:30. Scott was already in bed, reading a book about teaching strategies. He looked up when I entered. "How was your night?" "Fine. Tessa's going through some relationship drama." "Sorry to hear that." He went back to his book. That was it. No questions about what we talked about, where we went, why I was later than usual. He didn't even comment on my dress. Over the next few weeks, Julian and I texted constantly. He was funny, flirtatious, interested in my thoughts and feelings. We met for drinks twice more, always at different places, always with me telling Scott I was with Tessa or other work friends. "You're glowing lately," my mother Bernice said during our weekly phone call. "What's your secret?" I couldn't tell her about Julian, of course. But she was right. I did feel more alive than I had in years. "Just taking better care of myself," I said. "You know, self-care and all that." "Good for you, honey. You deserve to put yourself first for once. Scott is lucky to have you." My mother had never been Scott's biggest fan. She thought he was too quiet, too boring for her vivacious daughter. She'd been pushing me to live a little for years. Meanwhile, Scott's mother Evelyn had been making subtle comments about my recent absences. "You've been going out quite a bit lately," she said during Sunday dinner at their house. "Everything okay at home?" "Everything's fine," I said, perhaps a bit too sharply. "I'm just reconnecting with some old friends." Evelyn exchanged a look with her younger son Ethan, who was visiting for the weekend. I could see the judgment in their eyes, but I didn't care. Why shouldn't I have friends? Why shouldn't I go out and have fun? That night, I posted a gym selfie on Instagram. I'd started working out more, partly to look good for Julian, partly because it gave me another excuse to be out of the house. In the photo, I was wearing tight workout clothes, my hair perfectly arranged, despite supposedly just finishing a workout. Julian had been at the same gym. What a coincidence. He appeared in the background of the shot, clearly visible and undeniably handsome. I tagged the location and posted it with the caption, "Feeling strong and grateful for good friends who motivate me to be my best self." Scott said nothing about the post, but later that evening, I found him in his office with his old laptop open. On the screen was a spreadsheet titled Dates and Receipts. I could only see part of it before he quickly closed the laptop, but I caught glimpses of dates, times, and what looked like location information. "What was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just organizing some expenses for tax season," he said, not meeting my eyes. But something in his tone made me uneasy. Scott had always been detail-oriented, but this felt different, more deliberate, more suspicious. I pushed the feeling aside. I was probably just feeling guilty about Julian, making me paranoid. Scott was a high school math teacher, not a detective. He was probably exactly what he said he was doing, organizing receipts for taxes. Still, as I lay in bed that night listening to his steady breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The foundation of our predictable life was starting to crack, and I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. The lies came easier than I expected. Maybe that should have been a warning sign, but at the time, it felt like freedom. I'm going to be working late again tonight, I told Scott on a Tuesday morning, pouring coffee into my travel mug. Big commercial claim came in yesterday, warehouse fire, tons of documentation to review. Scott looked up from helping Nora with her breakfast. That's the third time this week. I know, it's been crazy busy. I kissed Nora's forehead. Be good for Daddy, sweetheart. When will you be home? Nora asked, syrup from her pancake sticky on her chin. Not too late, probably around 9. Another lie. I was meeting Julian at 6:30 for dinner at a restaurant 20 minutes outside of town. Somewhere we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. At work, I actually did have a warehouse fire claim to review, which made the lie feel almost true. I worked on it diligently until 5 o'clock, then touched up my makeup in the bathroom and changed from my conservative work blouse into something more flattering. Hot date? Asked my coworker Sarah, catching me applying lipstick in the mirror. Just dinner with an old friend, I said. Must be some friend. You look amazing. I did look good. I'd been putting more effort into my appearance lately, buying new clothes, getting my hair done more frequently. Julian made me feel beautiful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The restaurant was intimate and dimly lit. Julian was waiting at a corner table, looking handsome in a navy button-down shirt. He stood to greet me with a kiss on the cheek that lingered just a moment too long. You look stunning, he said, pulling out my chair. When was the last time Scott had pulled out my chair? Over dinner, Julian told me about his day bartending at a trendy place downtown. He had stories about interesting customers, drama between the staff, the kind of workplace excitement that made my insurance office seem even more mundane by comparison. You know, he said, reaching across to touch my hand, I keep thinking about what could have been, if we hadn't broken up in college. Julian, I started, but I didn't pull my hand away. I'm serious. We were good together, Amaris. We had chemistry, passion. Remember that weekend we drove to the beach house? I remembered. God, I remembered everything about that weekend. The way he'd looked at me, touched me, made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. That was a long time ago, I said weakly. Doesn't feel like it to me. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles softly. My wedding ring caught the candlelight, but I didn't pull away. After dinner, we walked to his car. The parking lot was dimly lit and mostly empty. I should go, I said, but I made no move toward my own car. Should you? He asked, stepping closer. When he kissed me, I didn't resist. I kissed him back with 8 years of pent-up frustration and longing. It felt like coming alive after being asleep for years. I've missed you, he whispered against my lips. I've missed you too. We made out in that parking lot like teenagers, hands roaming, breathing heavy. When we finally broke apart, my lipstick was smeared and my hair was messed up. Come to my place, he said. I can't, not tonight. Soon. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I got home at 9:15, having stopped to fix my makeup and hair in a gas station bathroom. Scott was in his office, grading papers as usual. How was the claim review? He asked without looking up. Tedious. Lots of documentation to sort through. That was it. No questions about why I smelled faintly of cologne, why my lips looked freshly kissed, why I was practically glowing with excitement. Either he was completely oblivious, or he was choosing to ignore the obvious signs. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. I'd invent reasons to stay late at work or go out with friends. Julian and I would meet for drinks, dinner, long walks in parks across town. The physical attraction between us was undeniable, but we hadn't slept together yet. It felt like we were building up to something inevitable. My friend Tessa, who actually was my coworker and friend, had become my unwitting alibi. She knew I was going through a rough patch in my marriage and encouraged my nights out. You need to prioritize yourself for once, she said over lunch at work. Scott seems nice enough, but you've been looking miserable for months. Now you're glowing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. If only she knew what I was actually doing. At home, Scott had become even more distant and routine-focused. He spent most evenings in his office, emerging only for dinner and to help Nora with homework. We barely talked anymore beyond logistics about schedules and household management. "Dad seems sad," Nora said one evening as I tucked her into bed. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" "He doesn't smile as much, and sometimes I catch him just staring at nothing." A pang of guilt hit me, but I pushed it aside. "Daddy's just tired from work. Teaching is stressful." "Are you and Daddy fighting?" "No, honey, we're not fighting." It was technically true. We weren't fighting because we barely spoke enough to disagree about anything. The turning point came on a Friday night. I'd told Scott I was having a girls' night out with Tessa and some other co-workers. Instead, I met Julian at his favorite bar downtown, the place where he worked part-time. It was crowded and lively, nothing like the quiet suburban restaurants where we usually met. Julian was in his element, knowing half the people there, charming everyone with his easy smile and quick wit. "This is Amaris," he introduced me to his co-workers. "My very special friend." The way he said special friend made it clear what he meant. I should have been mortified, but instead I felt thrilled. When was the last time anyone had claimed me with such obvious pride? We drank more than usual. I posted several Instagram stories throughout the night, group shots with Julian's friends, videos of us laughing at something he'd said, a photo of our hands intertwined on the bar top. I was careful to tag the location and time, wanting to document this feeling of aliveness and freedom. "You're having way too much fun," Julian said, pulling me close as we posed for another photo. "I deserve to have fun," I said, probably louder than necessary. "Yes, you do. You deserve so much more than what you're getting at home." His friends laughed and cheered, treating us like we were a couple. It felt intoxicating. Around 10 o'clock, Julian leaned in close to my ear. "So, when is your husband finally going to move out?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Come on, Amaris. This thing between us is obviously going somewhere. How much longer are you going to keep playing house with someone who doesn't appreciate you?" "It's complicated." "Is it? Seems pretty simple to me. You're unhappy. I make you happy. He's boring. I'm exciting. What's complicated about that?" He had a point, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy, like he was talking about a business transaction rather than my life. "Is your husband's name still on the lease?" he continued. "We own the house." "Even better. That means he'd have to buy you out, right? Or sell and split the proceeds." I stared at him. "Julian, are you asking about my finances?" He laughed and kissed my temple. "I'm asking about our future, beautiful. I want to know what we're working with here." Our future. The phrase should have thrilled me, but instead, it made my stomach turn slightly. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the calculating look in Julian's eyes as he asked about the house. "Let's not worry about that tonight," I said, forcing a smile. "Of course, tonight is about having fun." But the moment had shifted something. For the first time since we'd reconnected, I found myself really looking at Julian, not through the haze of nostalgia and attraction, but clearly. He was charming, yes, exciting, absolutely. But there was something else there too, something opportunistic. I pushed the thought away. I was probably just overthinking things because of the alcohol and guilt. When I got home at midnight, the house was dark except for the porch light Scott always left on for me. He was already asleep, or pretending to be. I crept upstairs quietly, but as I passed his office, I noticed his laptop was open again. This time, I could see more of the spreadsheet. Dates going back several weeks. Times. Location tags that matched my Instagram posts. Restaurant names. Even what looked like screenshots of my social media stories. My blood ran cold. Scott wasn't just organizing receipts for taxes. He was tracking me. I stood in the doorway for several minutes, staring at the evidence of his surveillance. Part of me was furious. How dare he spy on me? But another part of me was terrified. If he was documenting my activities this methodically, what was he planning to do with the information? I closed the laptop carefully and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. For the first time since this whole thing with Julian started, I wondered if I was in over my head. The next morning, Scott was his usual quiet self. He made coffee, helped Nora with her weekend homework, did laundry. But I caught him watching me more carefully than usual, like he was studying me. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be? You seem, I don't know, different." He looked at me for a long moment. "Do I?" There was something in his tone I'd never heard before. Something calm and resolved that made me more nervous than if he'd been angry. "I'm going to run some errands," I said, suddenly desperate to get out of the house. "Have fun," he said, turning back to his newspaper. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that Scott knew exactly what I'd been doing, and more unsettling, that he had a plan for what to do about it. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came on a Sunday afternoon, but not from Scott. It came from his mother. Evelyn Harker had never been subtle about her opinions, and after 30 years of being Scott's mother, she had no intention of starting now. She showed up at our house unannounced, ostensibly to drop off some books for Nora, but I could tell from her expression that she had other motives. "Amaris, dear, could we have a chat?" she said, settling herself on our living room couch like she owned the place. Scott was outside with Nora, helping her practice riding her bike without training wheels. Through the window, I could see them in the driveway, Scott running alongside as Nora pedaled frantically. "Of course," I said, though every instinct told me to make an excuse and leave. Evelyn was 62, silver-haired, and sharp as a tack. She'd raised 2 sons as a single mother after her husband died young, and she had zero tolerance for nonsense. She'd always been polite to me, but I'd never felt like I'd truly earned her approval. "I've been noticing some changes lately," she said without preamble. "In you, in Scott, in the atmosphere around here." "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't you?" She fixed me with a stare that made me feel like a teenager caught sneaking out. "You've been going out quite a bit lately. New clothes, new hairstyle, new attitude. Meanwhile, my son looks like he's carrying the weight of the world. Scott is fine. We're fine." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having some kind of midlife crisis, and Scott is too polite to call you on it." The accusation stung because it hit too close to home. "I don't appreciate your implications, Evelyn." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You're acting like a woman who's looking for something outside her marriage. The question is, have you found it?" Before I could answer, Scott and Nora came through the front door, both laughing about something. Nora had grass stains on her knees and a huge smile on her face. "Grandma," she exclaimed, running to hug Evelyn. "Hello, sweetheart. How's the bike riding coming along?" "Dad says I'm getting really good. I only fell twice today." Scott smiled, but I noticed it didn't reach his eyes. He looked tired, older than his 36 years. "Mum, I didn't know you were coming by," he said. "Spontaneous visit. I was just having a lovely chat with Amaris about current events." The way she said it made it clear that Scott would get the full report later. That evening, after Evelyn left and Nora was in bed, Scott finally brought up what had been hanging between us for weeks. "We need to talk," he said, appearing in the kitchen where I was loading the dishwasher. My heart rate spiked. "About what?" "About whatever's been going on with you lately." I straightened up, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I don't know what you mean." "Amaris, please don't insult my intelligence." "I'm not insulting anything. I just don't appreciate being interrogated by your mother, and now by you." "Interrogated?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm asking my wife why she's been lying to me for weeks." "I haven't been lying." "Really? So you really were working late all those nights? And all those girls' nights out really were with Tessa and your co-workers?" My mouth went dry. "Yes." "Interesting. Because I called your office last Tuesday when you said you were working on that warehouse claim. They said you'd left at 5. Shit. I went to the library to work. It's quieter there. The library closes at 8. You didn't get home until 10. He had me, and we both knew it. But instead of confessing, I went on the offensive. Are you tracking me now? Following me around? I'm trying to figure out why my wife has become a stranger. Maybe because my husband has become a boring, predictable robot who cares more about his gradebook than his marriage. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Scott flinched like I'd slapped him. Is that really what you think of me? I think you've gotten comfortable. We both have. Maybe I'm just trying to remember what it feels like to be alive. By lying to me? By sneaking around? By having friends? By going out? By not asking your permission for every single thing I do? I never asked you to ask permission. I asked you to be honest. We stared at each other across the kitchen island. 8 years of marriage, and I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Or maybe he was looking at one. I'm going to bed, I said finally. Amaris. But I was already walking away. The next few days were tense and awkward. We spoke only when necessary, and even then, it was about logistics. Who was picking up Nora? What time dinner would be ready? Whether the electric bill had been paid? I threw myself into my relationship with Julian with renewed intensity. If Scott wanted to be cold and suspicious, fine. I'd show him what he was missing. On Wednesday night, I met Julian at the bistro where he worked. It was busier than usual, and Julian was in his element, charming customers and co-workers alike. Several people recognized me from previous visits and greeted me like I belonged there. Amaris, good to see you again, said Mike, one of the regular bartenders. Julian's been talking about you all week. All good things, I hope, I said, sliding onto a bar stool. Oh, definitely. Though he did mention your home situation is complicated. I glanced at Julian, who was mixing drinks at the other end of the bar. How much had he told these people about my marriage? It's getting less complicated by the day, I said, louder than necessary. Julian appeared with my usual wine and a knowing smile. That's what I like to hear. As the evening progressed, I found myself drinking more than usual and posting more frequently on social media. I wanted Scott to see how much fun I was having without him. I wanted everyone to see. You know what? I announced to Julian and his co-workers around 10 o'clock. Life's too short to be bored. Damn right, said Julian, pulling me close for a kiss that was definitely not appropriate for public consumption. I posted a story immediately. A photo of Julian and me, drinks in hand, laughing at something he'd just whispered in my ear. The caption read, "Life's too short to be bored." Your husband's really okay with you being here so much? Asked Sarah, one of the waitresses. My husband doesn't control what I do, I said defiantly. Julian laughed. Besides, he'll probably be moving out soon anyway, right, babe? The comment made several people look uncomfortable, but I was too drunk and too angry to care. Maybe he will, I said. Maybe that would be the best thing for everyone. When I got home at nearly midnight, I was surprised to find the house completely dark. Usually Scott left the porch light on for me, but tonight everything was black. I fumbled for my keys and let myself in. The house felt different somehow, quieter, emptier. I climbed the stairs carefully, trying not to wake Nora. Our bedroom door was closed, which was unusual. Scott always left it open in case Nora needed something during the night. I pushed the door open and reached for the light switch. The bed was made. Scott wasn't there. Confused and slightly panicked, I checked his office. Empty. The guest bathroom. Empty. Even the living room couch where he sometimes fell asleep reading. That's when I noticed his keys on the kitchen counter. His car keys, house keys, office keys, all of them on the keyring I'd given him for our second anniversary. My hands shaking slightly, I looked around the kitchen more carefully. That's when I saw it, a single sheet of paper taped to the refrigerator. It wasn't a long letter. It wasn't emotional or accusatory. It was just a list of dates and facts, written in Scott's precise handwriting. October 15th, claimed to work late, left office at 5:01 p.m., posted Instagram story from Elm Street Bar at 7:30 p.m. October 27th, claimed girls' night with Tessa. Tessa was home with flu, posted Instagram story from downtown restaurant at 8:45 p.m. October 29th, claimed overtime for warehouse claim, posted Instagram story from Riverside Park at 6:00 p.m. with unidentified male. November 5th, claimed work dinner, posted Instagram story from Bistro with same unidentified male, tagged as special friend. November 12th, posted story captioned, "Life's too short to be bored with same male, 11:47 p.m. I've taken only my essential belongings. Nora is staying with my mother tonight. My attorney will be in touch regarding custody arrangements and division of assets. All financial records and evidence have been documented and filed. This marriage is over. You made that choice. I'm simply accepting it. Scott." I read the note 3 times before the reality sank in. Scott hadn't just suspected I was having an affair. He'd been systematically documenting it. Every lie, every social media post, every night out. He'd been building a case. And now he was gone. I sank into a kitchen chair, still holding the note. Part of me felt relieved. No more sneaking around, no more lies, no more guilt. But another part of me felt something I hadn't expected. Panic. Scott had always been there. Steady, reliable, predictable Scott. Even when I'd been angry at him for being boring, I'd never actually imagined him leaving. I'd thought he'd fight for our marriage, demand answers, get emotional. Instead, he'd done the most devastating thing possible. He'd quietly gathered evidence and walked away with his dignity intact. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Great night, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Maybe we can finally have that sleepover." For the first time since this whole thing started, the idea of sleeping with Julian didn't excite me. It terrified me, because suddenly I realized that while I'd been playing games and seeking excitement, Scott had been playing chess, and he'd just won. I woke up the next morning in an empty house, and the silence was deafening. No coffee brewing downstairs, no shower running in the master bathroom, no sounds of Scott helping Nora get ready for school. Just silence and the lingering smell of my own poor decisions. I called in sick to work. Not entirely a lie, since I felt nauseated with anxiety, and spent the morning trying to figure out what to do next. My first instinct was to call Scott, but when I tried his number, it went straight to voicemail. "Scott, it's me. We need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just leave without discussing things. Call me back." He didn't. I tried calling Evelyn's house, thinking maybe I could talk to Nora, but Evelyn answered with a tone so cold it could have frozen water. "Amaris?" "Evelyn, is Scott there? I need to speak with him." "He's not available." "What about Nora? I'd like to talk to my daughter." Nora is at school where she belongs. Unlike some people, we believe in maintaining normal routines for children during difficult times. The dig was obvious and well aimed. "When will she be home?" "I could come by." "That won't be necessary. Scott will be handling Nora's care for the foreseeable future." "You can't keep my daughter from me." "We're not keeping her from you, dear. We're simply prioritizing her emotional well-being during this transition. I'm sure you understand." She hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day alternating between anger and panic, calling Scott repeatedly and getting voicemail every time. I left increasingly desperate messages. "Scott, this is ridiculous. So I went out with an old friend a few times. That doesn't mean our marriage is over." "You're overreacting. We can work through this. We have a daughter to think about." "Fine, I made some mistakes, but running away isn't the answer. Come home so we can talk like adults." By evening, I still hadn't heard back from him. That's when I decided to drive to Evelyn's house and confront the situation directly. The house was a modest 2-story in an older neighborhood. with Scott's car parked in the driveway. Seeing it there made everything feel more real. He really had left. I rang the doorbell, and Ethan answered. Scott's younger brother looked uncomfortable when he saw me. "Hey, Amaris. This probably isn't the best time. I need to see my husband and my daughter." "I know, but maybe you should call first. Give everyone a chance to cool down." "Cool down?" Ethan, he left me. He packed up and left without even trying to work things out. Ethan glanced back into the house, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "Look, I'm trying to stay neutral here, but he's pretty hurt, Amaris. And he's got documentation of, well, everything." "Documentation of what? Going out with friends?" Ethan gave me a look that said he knew exactly what kind of friends I'd been seeing. "Maybe you should get a lawyer." A lawyer. The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just Scott being dramatic. This was serious. "Can I at least see Nora?" "She's doing homework, and honestly, she's confused and upset. Maybe give her a day or two to process." I wanted to argue, but something in Ethan's expression told me it would be pointless. The Harker family had closed ranks, and I was on the outside. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work. I needed the distraction, and I needed to maintain some sense of normalcy. But the moment I walked into the office, I could tell something was off. Conversation stopped when I entered rooms. Co-workers who usually greeted me warmly suddenly seemed very interested in their computer screens. Even Tessa, my closest work friend, seemed awkward when I approached her desk. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, of course. Just busy." She didn't meet my eyes. It wasn't until lunchtime that I figured out what was happening. I overheard two co-workers talking in the break room. "Did you see those Instagram stories? Her with that guy at the bar? While her husband was home with their kid, it's so tacky. I heard he left her, packed up and moved out. Good for him. She's been flaunting that affair for weeks." They stopped talking when they saw me, but the damage was done. My social media posts, which had felt like harmless fun at the time, were now public evidence of my infidelity. Everyone knew. I spent the afternoon trying to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every notification on my phone made me jump, hoping it was Scott. Instead, it was mostly Julian, texting increasingly demanding messages. "Where are you? Thought we were celebrating your freedom today." "Hello? You said your husband moved out. Isn't this what we wanted?" "Starting to feel like you're avoiding me. What's going on?" I hadn't told Julian about Scott leaving. Somehow, admitting it out loud would make it too real. But I couldn't avoid him forever. That evening, he showed up at my house unannounced. When I answered the door, he was holding a bottle of champagne and wearing a triumphant smile. "Congratulations, beautiful. I heard through the grapevine that you're officially a free woman." "How did you hear that?" "Small town, big mouths. Can I come in?" Reluctantly, I let him inside. He looked around the house like he was appraising it, taking note of the furniture, the artwork, the general level of affluence. "Nice place. Much bigger than my apartment. We'll be comfortable here." "We?" "Well, yeah. Now that Scott is out of the picture, we can finally be together properly. No more sneaking around." The assumption in his voice made my stomach turn. "Julian, this is all happening very fast." "Fast? Amaris, we've been building up to this for weeks. This is what we both wanted." "I never said I wanted my marriage to end." He laughed. "You didn't have to say it. Your actions said it loud and clear. The question is, when do I move in?" "Move in? Julian, I need time to process everything." His expression shifted from confident to annoyed. "Process what? You've been complaining about your boring husband for weeks. You've been sneaking around to see me. You posted pictures of us together for the whole world to see. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" He had a point, but hearing it laid out so bluntly made me realize how reckless I'd been. I'd been so focused on the excitement of the affair that I hadn't really thought about the consequences. "I think maybe we should slow down," I said. "Slow down?" His voice got louder. "Amaris, I moved back here for you. I've been waiting patiently while you figured out your situation. Now your situation is figured out, and you want to slow down. You moved back here for your parents. You said so yourself. That was part of it, but mostly I moved back because I couldn't stop thinking about you. About us. The intensity in his voice scared me. This wasn't the casual, fun reconnection I'd thought we were having. Julian had been planning something much more serious. I need some space, I said, to figure things out. Space? From me? From everyone. This is all happening too fast. Julian stared at me for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. You blow up your marriage for me, and now you want space? I didn't blow up my marriage for you. I blew it up because I was unhappy. Same thing. No, it's not. He set the champagne bottle down hard on my coffee table. You know what? Fine. Take your space. But don't expect me to wait around forever while you figure out what you want. There are plenty of women who know a good thing when they see it. After he left, I sat alone in my empty house and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. In the span of a few weeks, I'd gone from being a wife and mother to being a cautionary tale. My marriage was over, my reputation was in ruins, and the man I'd risked everything for was already threatening to move on to someone else. The next morning brought a new horror, a formal letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. Dear Mrs. Harker, it began, we represent your husband, Scott Harker, in the matter of your impending divorce. Please be advised that Mr. Harker is seeking primary custody of your minor daughter, as well as an equitable division of marital assets. We will require comprehensive financial records dating back 5 years, including, but not limited to bank statements, credit card records, and employment documentation. Additionally, we request a detailed accounting of all expenditures related to your extramarital activities, as these may be considered marital waste under Connecticut law. The letter went on for 2 pages, written in cold, legal language that made my blood run cold. Scott wasn't just leaving me. He was systematically dismantling our life together, and he was using my own actions as ammunition. I needed a lawyer. I needed help. But first, I needed to understand exactly how much evidence Scott had gathered and how much damage I'd done to my own case by documenting my affair so thoroughly on social media. As I sat at my kitchen table, reading the legal letter for the 3rd time, I realized that Scott had been planning this for weeks. While I'd been posting pictures and having fun, he'd been quietly building a case that could cost me everything. The quiet, predictable husband I'd been so eager to escape had turned out to be far more strategic than I'd ever imagined, and I was about to find out just how much his patience and planning would cost me. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and disappointment. Amanda Chen barely looked up as she said Scott had been thorough. She laid out receipts, bar tabs, and a minute-by-minute timeline, then explained the private investigator had tracked Julian's hotel stays too. My stomach dropped when she said Scott had subpoenaed my phone records, GPS pings in the hotel parking lot, plus credit card charges that looked like dates. Marital waste, she called it, $8,000. Then the word that broke me, supervised visitation. Screenshots of my own posts sat on her desk like evidence. Outside, Julian texted about moving in, and I finally understood this wasn't romance. It was ruin. The family services building felt like a factory for heartbreak. Beige walls, fluorescent light, rules recited like routine. I arrived early in my safest dress, coached to look stable and contrite. Mrs. Patterson explained the boundaries. 2 hours every other Saturday, no divorce talk, no promises, no blame. Scott brought Nora in without meeting my eyes. She hugged me politely, smaller, quieter, like she'd aged overnight. We colored and played games under supervision, but the warmth was gone. In court, Scott's evidence marched forward. Photos, records, posts, witnesses. The judge chose stability. Him. I got supervised weekends and a house I couldn't afford.